To celebrate the International Day for Universal Access to Information, join UNESCO in affirming and reiterating the urgency to respect and maintain the right to information, especially amid the COVID-19 outbreak. In times of emergencies such as the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to protect the right to access information so that communities can protect themselves and their families. Journalists debunk the falsehoods and report the facts about the disease. Scientists and policymakers provide us with directives and guidance on how to cope with the pandemic. Citizens can know the measures to prevent and mitigate the risks. That's why we need public information without delay, with strong and effective institutions to keep citizens informed. Access to information is not a burden, but a right that needs to be supported by law, and any restrictions to this right should conform to the law, be proportionate and limited to protect the citizens. Join our high-level webinar on 28 September and all the online events across the world that UNESCO and partners are organizing to celebrate our right to access information. Go to our website for more information. Access to information, saving lives, building trust, bringing hope.
Good day, welcome wherever you are joining us from around the world. We have a fantastic audience from many different countries. This is UNESCO's kickoff event for the International Day for Universal Access to Information, and it's the high-level panel, Access to Information, Saving Lives, Building Trust, Bringing Hope. A very optimistic sentiment. We will start with a video message from Audrey Azoulay, the Director General of UNESCO, and then we have a fantastic lineup of 6 speakers in order of speaking. We have His Excellency Aziz Abdul Karim, Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, Jing Qiu, the Deputy Director General of UNESCO, the Honorable Len Eugene Nagbe, the Minister of Information, Cultural Affairs and Tourism from Liberia, Dr. Sylvie Briand, the Director of the Global Infectious Hazard Preparedness at the WHO, Maria Baron, the incoming Chair of the Steering Committee from the Open Government Partnership, and last but certainly not least, Sinead McSween, Vice President, Public Affairs, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and Managing Director of Twitter. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us for this important discussion. I think everybody's really looking forward to it. We're going to have 2 rounds of questions for each of the speakers, interspersed with a few videos like we had just now. Time is tight, so I will ask speakers to strictly keep to the 5-minute time limit for each of the questions. We will receive questions through the video chat, through the chat feature. We won't answer them live, but they will be noted by UNESCO. And if anybody's having technical problems with their, with the video or whatever, you can ask questions on the chat and they will be answered by UNESCO. So we will now start with the video message from Ms. Azoulay.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis ravie de vous retrouver aujourd'hui pour célébrer cette première journée internationale de l'accès universel à l'information, première journée depuis sa proclamation par l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies. Cette journée avait été adoptée de manière quasiment prémonitoire, quelques mois avant le déclenchement de la pandémie de la Covid-19. Parce qu'en période de crise, l'envie de croire peut l'emporter sur la volonté de s'informer, pour reprendre une formule employée dans le courrier de l'UNESCO. Le virus a fait de l'accès à l'information un enjeu vital, nous faisant prendre conscience qu'il s'agissait d'un bien commun à part entière. Ce n'est d'ailleurs pas que sur un plan sanitaire que l'accès à l'information est essentiel. C'est aussi le cas plus largement pour l'ensemble de notre contrat social. Parce que l'accès à l'information le droit des citoyens de demander et de recevoir librement des informations d'intérêt public sont aussi le socle d'autres droits, la liberté d'expression, l'éducation, l'égalité entre les genres, l'exercice libre et éclairé de la citoyenneté. Et pourtant, il existe de profondes inégalités dans cet accès à l'information. Pour ceux qui vivent dans des zones plus isolées, pour ceux, et notamment les populations autochtones, qui n'ont pas accès à l'information dans leur langue, et aussi pour près de la moitié de la population mondiale qui n'a pas accès à Internet, dont beaucoup de femmes et de filles. S'informer devient une difficulté de tous les jours quand ce n'est pas, dans ce cas, une impossibilité pratique. Dans le même temps, 3 menaces d'une nature différente pèsent sur l'accès à l'information et sur la liberté d'expression. C'est tout d'abord la sécurité physique et sanitaire des journalistes qui est en cause, quand de trop nombreux professionnels de l'information paient de leur vie l'exercice libre et indépendant de leur métier. Ainsi, pour reprendre le début de la pandémie, entre le 1er mars et le 31 mai dernier, l'ONG suisse Presse Emblème Campagne a enregistré pas moins de 127 décès de journalistes dans 31 pays, les 2 tiers d'entre eux étant alors en service. C'est aussi la capacité des journalistes à exercer leur profession de manière libre, indépendante, qui peut être menacée quand les gouvernements altèrent, dans le cadre de la pandémie, les lois ou les politiques publiques existantes. Le Centre pour le droit et la démocratie a ainsi estimé que plus de 40 pays avaient récemment pris des mesures ayant eu des conséquences négatives pour l'accès à l'information. En cette journée internationale, l'UNESCO voudrait donc appeler les gouvernements à ne pas opposer liberté d'expression et sécurité sanitaire, car sacrifier la première à la deuxième, c'est finalement risquer de se priver des deux à la fois. Enfin, la 3e menace qui pèse sur le travail des journalistes est d'ordre économique, car cette crise économique prive la presse d'une grande partie de ses recettes publicitaires, en fragilise ainsi la diversité et la pluralité. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est dans ce contexte que depuis le début de la crise sanitaire, l'UNESCO a renforcé ses mesures de soutien pour un accès à une information fiable et de qualité. Par exemple, nous avons produit et diffusé dans plusieurs langues, dont des langues autochtones, des messages de sensibilisation sur la pandémie, en prenant notamment pour relais les stations de radio associatives et communautaires, celles qui touchent au plus près les populations. Nous avons aussi lancé sur les réseaux sociaux une campagne #Don'tGoViral pour informer les communautés, notamment en Afrique, et ainsi toucher près de 128 millions de personnes à travers les réseaux sociaux. C'est aussi dans ce cadre que nous avons continué de soutenir le travail des journalistes et de la presse, par exemple par un cours en ligne à destination des journalistes développé avec l'Université du Texas et l'Organisation mondiale de la santé. Un cours qui a été suivi par plus de 9000 professionnels de plus de 160 pays. Alors que la circulation du virus, comme celle des fausses rumeurs, se poursuit, voire s'accélère dans certaines régions, il est essentiel de poursuivre notre travail. Je voudrais ici remercier toutes celles et tous ceux qui y participent. Et je voudrais avoir un mot tout particulier pour saluer l'engagement de la République d'Ouzbékistan, qui est représentée avec nous aujourd'hui et qui accueillera l'année prochaine, je l'espère, les célébrations de cette journée internationale. C'est là un engagement décisif, non seulement pour l'accès à l'information, mais encore pour la vie même pluraliste de nos sociétés. Je nous souhaite donc une bonne journée internationale. Merci.
Okay, great. That was a really inspiring message from the Director General of UNESCO. Let me move on now to our panelists, and I'm going to start with His Excellency, Mr. Abdulhakimov from Uzbekistan. Last year, The Economist awarded Uzbekistan the prestigious title of Country of the Year. Congratulations, I guess you're doing something well over there. And one reason for that was the increase in media freedom and better flow of access to information. Perhaps you could outline to us briefly how those changes prepared you when it came time to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think you're still on mute. So I think you'll have to take yourself off mute for us to hear you. That's it.
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to join such prominent panel to celebrate the landmark event, the International Day for Universal Access to Information. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Madame André Azoulay, UNESCO Director General, for her invitation to this forum. I also commend organizers, in particular UNESCO Information and Communication Sector, for their efforts to arrange our discussions today, despite the challenging period. It is very symbolic that we gather on September 28, which was proclaimed by both UNESCO and United Nations as the International Day for Universal Access to Information. It is also relevant that we dedicate our panel to the role of access to information in fighting crises like COVID-19 pandemic. This issue has been overwhelming topic for global forums within the United Nations family. Before the pandemic issue, I would like to address to recent developments in my country and highlight some key milestones. The moderator rightly mentioned recent changes in media freedom in Uzbekistan. I would like to say more. In fact, Uzbekistan has witnessed unprecedented transformation in all areas of life during the last couple of years, especially after 2016, when President Mirziyoyev came to power. Uzbekistan started to truly open up to the world at that time. Despite challenges, the leadership of Uzbekistan, personally President Mirziyoyev, has demonstrated a strong political will and full commitment to create conditions for ensuring government openness, liberalizing media and supporting journalists as an imperative of all other reforms. There has been a broad understanding that promoting access to information is no longer an option, but crucial necessity for building a democratic society and further developing the country as a whole. The consistent policy has led us to following tangible results. First, we improved significantly the legal framework to ensure the rights to information and protect journalists, reporters, and bloggers. More than 20 laws has been adopted or modified, among them on openness of the activities of public authorities and administrations, on guarantees and freedom of access to information, on protection professional activities of journalists and others. Second, in order to implement the state policy in this area, we established Agency for Information and Mass Communications under the President's administration. We strengthened spokesperson institution and press services in all government agencies, as well as we supported direct communication and feedback channels with the citizens. The Public Fund for Support and Development of National Mass Media also started its work this year. The number of media outlets increased dramatically. State media to 650 and non-governmental media to 1,200 entities. Third, we guarantee the plurality of voices. We have restored the activities of many foreign news outlets and human rights organizations that were banned before. Among them, BBC Uzbek, Voice of America, Deutsche Welle, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, and some others. These efforts today brought us to politically and socially active population. While the media is highly involved, to shaping public opinion and making the political and social processes transparent. One of the key results is that Uzbekistan has now a very dynamic and vibrant civil society, especially young generation. From this standpoint, I wouldn't be overstatement to say that Uzbekistan has been in more prepared position to face the pandemic, and our media reforms helped us successfully implement a comprehensive approach against crisis in information sector. This strategy have four main pillars. First, we have arranged massive campaign by mobilizing all media to raise public awareness about virus and the ways to contain it, including quarantine measures. Second, we fight hard with the help of journalists and bloggers against fake news and disinformation, especially in early stage of the crisis. Third, we are regularly publishing statements on the lost lives, infected people, and other negative impacts for population to assess the scale of pandemic. The last, we mobilize tremendous efforts to provide access to educational resources, scientific knowledge, and information while public institutions are closed. Eventually, being a member of operational headquarters to fight pandemic in Uzbekistan, I should acknowledge that while shaping our information strategy, we learn the best practices from other countries through UNESCO's COVID-19 response platform. I would like to commend tremendous work that UNESCO has done and is doing in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really inspiring opening talk. And I'm not going to provide a resume of what people say because time is short and people can hear them for themselves. But I think at one point I would like to highlight, you said that you have now an engaged and active population. And I think that that really is the key to what constitutes a democracy. Moving now to Jingyu, the Deputy Director General of UNESCO, and UNESCO has, of course, been celebrating access to information as a human right for a long time now, and it has highlighted the importance of that to empower citizens and also to hold governments to account. Looking at that through the lens of the title of our panel, Saving Lives, Building Trust, and Bringing Hope, what can you say are the lessons learned by UNESCO for how to create a multi-stakeholder response in the time of COVID?
Thank you, Chair. You raise a very important question. So I will say, firstly, we learned that public access to information is even more important during the health crisis. It is not a liability or a burden, but a remedy. It serves public health and economic goals and should therefore be part of the response to the crisis. We learned that the timely access to reliable, accurate, and accessible health information can be the difference between life and death. Access to information protects citizens from false information and reduces risks of stigmatization and discrimination against vulnerable groups. It gives citizens the tools they need to ensure that public funds spent fighting the pandemic are used fairly and wisely. We also learned that more progress is needed to meet the targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially in the light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Legal instruments that ensure the timely provision of information are in place in many countries. Since 2000, the number of freedom of information laws has increased threefold. But over a third of the world's countries still have not passed access to information laws. At UNESCO, we will continue to recommend that governments adopt freedom of information legislation where such laws do not exist. We also support strengthening the capacity of the relevant authorities so they can respond to information requests step up the digitalization of requests, re-evaluate the national system collecting statistical and other data, strengthen record keeping, and invest in proactive disclosure of information and data. Through these measures, we can avoid placing limits on the right to access to information. While limits may sometimes be justified in times of crisis, they must never extend beyond the duration of the crisis. Digital technologies play an important role here. They provide the robust ways of maintaining right to information systems during health emergencies, building on lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. States should put in place digital systems that both prepare for future crises and make it possible to automatically disclose information and data to which the public has a right. I hope that I answered your question. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, what you're saying is music to my ears. My organization has been saying since the beginning that we need to regard access to information not as an additional service, but as an essential service, part of the core response to the crisis. And I think you have very much affirmed that. I pass now to Minister Nagbe, and I think we have your country somehow to thank for the fact that this is now a UN day, so that's wonderful news. I was actually at a meeting in New York in July where we met with your representatives, and they announced that they were going to lead this process. Please tell us a little bit about what led Liberia to take this position.
Well, thanks very much for this opportunity, and I want to start by thanking the Director General for her beautiful statement. It actually encapsulates the ideals that Liberia subscribes to regarding the right to freedom of access to information. Liberia supported and sponsored the resolution proclaiming September 28 as International Day for the Access to Information because it is in line with our own efforts in our country to ensure that our citizens, through a structural and legal platform, will have access to relevant information, not just information about politics, but information about education, about health, about our infrastructure campaign. And since then, our country was one of the first countries in the world, in Africa, to have legislated an act making it compulsory for the government to provide information to the citizens and to journalists once there is a demand for such information. And then we follow up that law with subsidiary policy actions, because you could have a good law that is not implementable. So beyond the law, we set up an information commission that will adjudicate cases where there are government officials or members of the public service who will be reticent in providing information to the public, the information that is demanded by the public. So we've set up those institutions and we've tested them, and where we found that there were hurdles, we've tweaked the policies to fit with the reality to achieve the goal of ensuring that the public has access to information whenever and wherever they want. I'm not saying that there are no hurdles, that there are no impediments. We have seen some on both sides, where citizens are requesting information, and perhaps because of the infrastructure, the fact that some agencies have not put their information online, there are still issues of clerical record keeping. So if a citizen comes up and say, I want to see the budget of a particular agency, and that budget is not readily available online, we have seen delays. So we have moved as a government to digitize our budgeting process. We are also strong members of the Open Government Partnership. We are using that platform also to complement the laws that we have on the books and the policies that we have implemented to ensure that citizens have access to government information. And somebody will ask why we are doing this as a country. It is because of our recent history as a country. We experienced dictatorship, we experienced war, so we know what lack of access to information does to a country. And therefore, the entire nation will come together to say that we have to be open, we have to be transparent. In fact, the government, when Mr. Weah became president, one of the first things he did was to decriminalize some of the laws that made free speech a crime. Like if you didn't like what the president was doing and you criticize him very strongly, under the past laws that we inherited, that was a crime. So we scrapped that out of the book. So right now we've dismissed criminal libel is no more on our books. Sedition is no more on our books. And then there was also a law that criminal sedition against the president. We've taken that off the books to create the enabling environment for free speech and for access to information. In many areas, we're working with Carter Center to give access to women and girls to information about the justice system, because we have a situation with mass rape that is a scourge on the image of our country that we are dealing with. But with more access to information, we have seen that the public can now participate, not just in the political discourse, but also in pushing the greater good of the entire country. So it has been beneficial to Liberia, and this is why we supported this resolution. Thank you.
That's very encouraging. I have to say, on behalf of civil society, we were delighted to see the UN declare this as an official UN day. So it's a great leadership that you've shown. Dr. Briand, I think WHO has come under a huge amount of attention and pressure these days, so thanks very much for joining this panel. WHO has described the current situation as an infodemic, sort of in parallel to the pandemic. Please elaborate on why WHO did that, and also tell us a little bit how different stakeholders can perhaps try to address that problem.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for organizing this very important event. Indeed, WHO is talking about infodemic, and infodemic is the overabundance of information, some accurate, some not, that spreads alongside a disease outbreak. So infodemic is nothing new, but in the digital age, the COVID-19 infodemic spread in real time and reaches all countries on the planet, and it spread therefore further and faster than in other epidemics. With an overwhelming amount of information in the news and on social media, people don't know how to differentiate useful from harmful information and turn to friends, families, colleagues, and people they trust for updates and guidance on what to believe and how to go about their daily lives. Infodemic, when it's not well managed, is triggering fear, anxiety, poor observance of proven public health measures, distrust in governments and public health experts, and has resulted in physical harm as well. Both innocence of circulation of misinformation and malicious disinformation campaigns have prompted entire society across the board to take action that may put them at higher risk of spreading coronavirus disease and make them more vulnerable to harming their health. For instance, in Iran, more than 500 people died after ingesting toxic methanol, erroneously thinking it could cure COVID-19. And in India, rumors spread that testing and diagnosing for COVID-19 was a plot to harvest organs. It sparked delayed testing and uptick in COVID-19 related death and violence towards health workers. What we do know and what we continue to improve our knowledge of is how adapt our connection with people to foster better behavior adoption. Different populations have different information needs, channels, and barriers. which may require support at the individual, community, and social level. We also know that evidence-based intervention can reduce individual and community transmission of disease. So I fully agree with your statement. Access to accurate and reliable information is critical to bring hope, build trust, and save life in times of COVID-19. And managing infodemic relies on three important pillars. Firstly, provide the right information at the right time in the right format so that people can protect their health and the health of their loved ones and communities. The ultimate success of infodemic management is to change people's behaviors, to help them make healthy choices instead of harmful ones. And it is essential to listen to the community, understand their concerns, and provide information that will enable them to make healthy choices. Not a top-down communication, it is a two-way dialogue with people and community to co-develop recommendations adapted to the context and local needs. For instance, early in the COVID-19 pandemic, we worked with faith-based organizations to co-develop guidance on how to manage safe religious gathering. Second point, it is critical to debunk myths and correct misinformation. Listening to communities' concerns and providing timely answers is not enough. It is extremely important to debunk myths, especially when certain medication or behaviors may be harmful. There are now hundreds of fact-checker organizations helping to trace misinformation. And thirdly, it's very important to amplify the right information through trusted networks. Each community has several trusted networks. Therefore, we have built wide-ranging partnerships across the UN system with civil society organizations, youth organizations, media, researchers and academia, technology and business sectors, and faith leaders. Because COVID-19 has impacted every aspect of society, a whole of society approach will be needed to mitigate its impact and address it fully. More importantly, a comprehensive management of infodemic requires that communities or networks, such as the one I mentioned above, are empowered to develop solutions that facilitate the spread of useful information and stop the spread of misinformation and tackle the epidemic disease. In collaboration with UN agencies like UNESCO and many stakeholders, and by rooting our efforts in science-backed evidence, we certainly aided in the right direction. And we applaud UNESCO for its continued call for access to information as a fundamental human right and for engendering more equitable processes to gain that access. And we at WHO, we stand shoulder to shoulder with them in this effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think you have definitely put meat on the bones of the concept of saving lives with some of those rather terrible stories, but important for us to hear about. Of course, when we talk about access to information in this context, we're talking about access to official information, information held by public authorities, and we do hope that that will be more on the reliable than on the misinformation and certainly not disinformation side. So, Ms. Baron, the OGP has been very active. The Open Government Partnership has been very active in this space. They have launched the Open Response and Open Recovery platform. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that means for each of us?
Thank you, Toby. Can you hear me well? Yes. Thank you. Yes, so OGP, and when I say OGP, I mean OGP, the support unit, the steering committee, and as well the community has worked. They have worked really hard since the beginning of the pandemic and during this new social distanced world to be on top of world events and government policies and regulation regarding openness and access to information. So as you know, the community after, right at the beginning, after seeing a lot of steps backwards on access to information, quickly co-created many statements, many new standards, guidelines, and criteria asking governments to abide by those in this new reality. In Latin America, just to show, alone, 9 countries have passed rules and regulations that negatively affect access to information. But the problem, as you know, is deeper. It's not only access to information that has been affected, but also other rights that together guarantee sort of a more healthy civic space in the different countries, like freedom of expression, gathering, also privacy. So to relate to your question, with the government of South Korea, who with me will share OGP's co-chairship this year within OGP, we have worked on 3 priorities. One of them is, in fact, the protection of civic space and public participation, where we'll spend a lot of time and commitment working with groups who we have worked with for a long time to clearly visualize that the rights that we have conquered during so many years cannot be lost after the pandemic. And so, you know, OGP, as you mentioned, launched this very interesting, in my view, and successful, I think, campaign called Open Response, Open Recovery, or OROR, as we call it. Just to explain a little bit, open response meaning, you know, asking and promoting for more proactive transparency and meaningful and more qualitative information, as well as also the use of platforms to mobilize the community for assistance on health and vulnerable groups regarding the infectious side of the information, and also contracting on medical materials and inputs. And then on the other hand, open recovery, meaning we're asking for actions more on economic stimulus and recovery packages to be more integrated into transparency and civic participation and social accountability of these stimulus and relief programs. There's a lot of materials around this, you know, in OGP's website, as well as good practices that come from the different governments, as well as from civil society groups that, and they have created sort of a tracker, I would say, and you can search, you know, what has been happening if you want to sort of replicate. But in this regard, our second priority with the government of Korea as co-chairs, we have worked for a couple of months to define a work on anti-corruption, of course. And we have seen during the length of this pandemic that even in these difficult, both sort of sanitary and economic hardship, that there are and there have been a lot of problems in relation to regular contracts on goods and services that did not reach the meant original beneficiaries in many countries. And this has been true in UK, in Ecuador, in the US, in South Africa, just to name a few. So we will devote, again, a lot of time and commitment working with a group of activists that we have worked a lot for a long time on government purchases, but also beneficial owners, transparency, asset declarations, and money in politics. So to do this, sort of a cross-cutting priority, I think the most relevant one that we have worked with South Korea is to ensure and bring to OGP a high-level political engagement around open government. And I'm very, very glad that I'm here participating in this event so that I can ask the fellow panelists to join us in this opportunity to make this effort a really more a relevant one during the next year and the next months. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think it's very important to remind us that this pandemic is not just about health, but it's also about the economy. And we've seen a lot of very fast-moving economic measures, which has been great and helped save us, I think, but also opens up the door definitely to corruption. Ms. McSweeney, Twitter has for a long time been a very, very important source of information for people, but I think during the pandemic, the importance and the rapidity of flow of information over Twitter has really served a huge important purpose. Twitter has worked with governments and civil society and other actors to help ensure that information is reaching as wide a selection of the population as possible, and that it falls into the category that Ms. Bouillon described, accurate and reliable information, and not just information of any sort. Can you tell us a little bit about what Twitter's done at this time to enhance its messaging and reaching out to people?
Thank you, and thank you to UNESCO for the opportunity to participate in this panel marking the International Day for Universal Access to Information. I think that as we face the challenges in today's world, the pandemic itself, but also the infodemic, things like this event, partnership and collaboration, where we draw together diverse minds and experts, is going to be key to getting through it. I think when we talk about access to information, Twitter, fits firmly in that space as an open public platform directed towards serving the public conversation. It's an immensely powerful tool to disseminate information, but as the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility and no end of challenge. So I'm happy to talk about both the positive side of what we're doing to push out quality and reliable information. But I think over the course of our discussion over the next hour, we will also address some of the challenges around disinformation. So Twitter at its core serves the public conversation, and in doing so, we want to protect the quality of the public conversation. And we're serving a global audience, and so we have to focus on the needs of that global audience. We strongly believe that there should be one global open internet, and that is critical to allow everybody everywhere to access information. Any fragmentation of the internet, whether that comes from individual governments restricting citizens' access to the internet, or indeed introducing regulations which actually entrench the dominance of a small number of big players, can only result in less access and less information for people around the world. In looking at our efforts to protect the public conversation, we have had to step those up considerably over the last 6 to 8 months in the context of COVID-19 and the challenges that has brought. We have sought to elevate sources of reliable information, making sure that we're helping people find accurate, authoritative information when they come to the platform for it. And we have done this, as you mentioned, by building partnerships with governments, with non-governmental organizations. And, in addition to ensuring that we are getting the right message from the right source at the right time, we have also facilitated the raising of relief funds and contributing pro bono advertising products to both governments and nonprofit organizations so that they can elevate and augment their messaging within the Twitter platform. Just 6 days in early January, before the official designation of the virus, we launched a search prompt feature. So a dedicated search prompt feature, so that when somebody searched for COVID-19, they were met with credible, authoritative content at the very top of the search experience. And that has now, at this stage, been expanded to over 80 countries worldwide and is available in 29 languages. And we constantly monitor the conversation on the service to ensure that any keywords, including common misspellings, because that is the way of the world, will generate the quality search results. And where we have launched that search prompt, we have partnered with either the National Public Health Agency in that area or with the World Health Organization directly. And again, that is designed to push the most important content to the top of search results and into home timelines so that people are getting reliable information. And we've had over 160 million people visiting COVID-19 curated pages over 2 billion times. So again, that's a reservoir of tried and tested, quality, accurate, reliable information. In that context as well, we have supported public health messaging in individual countries with, some of the core, interesting and unique aspects of the platform, like trends, but also emojis, in order to augment and color in the public health messaging about staying at home, or washing hands, wearing masks, etc., and have those hashtags across different languages, just to keep reiterating and refreshing those core public health messages. And then, of course, we've had the kind of ancillary challenges that have occurred in society arising from COVID-19, but also the restrictions. So we've seen increase in domestic and gender-based violence, mental health challenges, child protection challenges. So we have brought the same tools to those those messages as well, to ensure that they're augmented on the platform. And I just finished with the point that in a world where information is everywhere, but the quality and reliability of that information is more of a challenge. We have also stepped up further on work that we had actually previously done with UNESCO around media literacy and digital literacy, to ensure that we're giving young people and others the critical thinking skills to address themselves to a piece of information, but also, before relying on it, look to what was its source. Is it timely? Is it recent? And that's work that we enjoyed doing in the past with UNESCO, and we were very happy to refresh that in April in the context of COVID-19. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think everybody's very interested to hear about the measures that Twitter has been taking. Thanks to everyone for keeping on time. We're more or less on track, and I think we will now cue in a short video. Great. That's very inspiring as well. So my next question goes to His Excellency, Mr. Abdu Hakimov from Uzbekistan. Next year, you are queued up to host International Day for Universal Access to Information. And hopefully by then, the COVID crisis will be under control such that we can actually have an in-person meeting. Please tell us a little bit about the reasons that you're going to do that, and what about some of the lessons that we've learned that will need to be discussed at that meeting?
Dear Chair, thank you for giving the floor to me again. I would like to elaborate our engagement with the UNESCO on organizing the conference to celebrate Universal Access to Information Day. In fact, our talks on that matter are going on since last December. Initially, the event was planned in the beginning of this month, but we agreed to postpone it to a later date due to pandemic and travel and sanitary restrictions. Now we have common understanding on holding this landmark forum next fall. Taking this opportunity, I would like to renew the strict commitment of the government of Uzbekistan to host the conference in Tashkent on highest possible level. We attach great importance to this event, as this day will be celebrated globally for the first time. Moreover, Uzbekistan has also many success stories to share with the world community about information and media sector development, as well as securing freedom of expression. Regarding the second part of your question, I would like to say that COVID-19 pandemic came suddenly from nowhere and disrupted all areas of human life in all countries without exception. I think in terms of scale and depth, pandemic taught the whole world many bitter lessons than any other crisis before. One of the most fundamental lessons learned is that the countries with the wide access to information, media freedom, and independent journalism are much more capable than others to efficiently counter any crisis and reduce its impacts. Let it be epidemiological, socio-economical, or political challenges. Because free access to information is an essential element to unite the people, build and strengthen public trust, and consolidate societies to support the governments in their efforts to fight with the pandemic. From this standpoint, I strongly believe, among with the socio-economical, political, and other factors, access to information should equally to be integral part of any development strategy on national, regional, and global levels. This recipe not only helps us build sustainable societies and prosperous states, but also plays a key role in preparing the countries and international community to respond better to future crises. Here I would like to stress the tremendous potential of the UN family, especially UNESCO, in mobilizing global efforts aimed at supporting developing and underdeveloped countries to cope with the challenges ahead. For this, among with the other areas of competence, we expect that UNESCO will redouble its efforts and communication and capacity of programs in information and communication sphere, as well as the further reinforced intersectoral engagement given UNESCO's very broad mandate. In order to fight efficiently any crisis, we must have an access to professional journalism and reliable information to quickly assess the situation, adopt and organize ourselves. In this expertise to develop the effective way of responding to the crisis, as well as digital technologies and online platforms to keep communications alive. In this regard, the international conference we are planning in Tashkent would be a unique opportunity to discuss these issues, make in-depth analysis of our successes and failings, strong and weak points, as well as put towards new initiatives to boost global partnership in the area of access to information. I am confident this event will help us in our efforts to implement the 2030 agenda and in particular target 16.10 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which calls for ensuring public access to information and protecting fundamental freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It sounds like an interesting day, and I hope that we are able to do it. A couple of announcements. Firstly, Ms. Beyond had to leave. As I mentioned in my opening comments, the WHO is quite under pressure these days, so she won't be joining us for this second round. We are running a little bit late, so I'm going to ask speakers to keep their comments a little bit brief. And I'm going to turn now to you, Ms. McSweeney, and you already addressed this a little bit in your first round of comments, but tackling the disinformation and misinformation is incredibly important thing to do, but if we go too far along that route, and we've certainly seen some countries that have gone far too far along that route, we start to trench on the right to freedom of expression. Maybe you could mention a little bit about how Twitter is seeking to achieve that very delicate balance between the right of people to speak, which your platform exists for, as you said, and yet ensuring that false information doesn't undermine people's choices.
Thank you. And I mean, as you flagged in the question, it's not without its challenges, and there is a line to be walked. I think there are a couple of elements to what we're doing. Firstly, what I highlighted earlier around surfacing the quality information. So, you know, putting that prominently in people's timelines and search. And after that, then it's a combination of making sure that our policies and our enforcement are robust and cognizant of the specific challenges that are facing us now. Increasing transparency and sharing more data to ensure that the experts and public can better analyze how the conversation around COVID-19 is evolving on the Twitter platform. And then underneath that, that kind of overarching contribution at a societal level to increasing the levels of digital and media literacy amongst citizens. So on the policy side, we have broadened our definition of harm to address content that, you know, is advising people to do things that clearly is injurious to their health. We heard some examples earlier about, you know, taking or drinking different things, or, you know, address content that goes directly against authoritative sources of public health information, whether that's global or public. So that's, you know, advising people against, you know, social distancing or mask wearing, those kinds of issues. Then on the as well, sitting alongside that policy evolution, we have a zero tolerance of any artificial amplification of public health misinformation or any attempt to abuse or manipulate the service. And so since we introduced the COVID-19 guidance, we have removed in excess of 15,000 tweets and challenged over 4.5 million accounts. And by that, I mean making sure that they're authentic accounts engaging in conversation on the platform and not engaged in amplification or manipulation of the debate. I've mentioned the focus on media and digital literacy. I think we have all recognized the importance of media and journalists in sharing news and information about COVID-19, and the role I think that they play in walking that line between ensuring access to information, restricting misinformation, but protecting free speech and human rights. So we have, over the course of the pandemic, given financial support to both the Committee to Protect Journalists and the International Women's Media Foundation as organizations who are working to uphold the values of a free press. On the transparency and research side, we launched a specific COVID-19 API endpoint for developers and researchers so that they could study the public conversation about COVID-19 in real time. So that's a unique data set covering tens of millions of tweets daily, and you know, making that available for free is something that only Twitter uniquely can do, but it's immensely valuable in terms of seeking answers to the kinds of challenges that we're talking about today. And we continue to innovate and respond to new challenges as they emerge, trying to stay one step ahead of bad actors and others. But partnership and collaboration, I think, is key to both identifying those challenges and then finding solutions for them.
Great, thank you. I think that one of the unique features of the digital world is that there are a lot of more speech responses as opposed to sort of closing down speech. The response to bad speech is more speech, and there's a lot of opportunities for that, and you've outlined some of those. It is certainly a challenging area. Minister Nagbe, your country finds itself in the relatively unique situation of this being its second pandemic. And of course, in 2013, for about 3 years, you battled with the Ebola virus. I think all of us were watching with great concern and attention from around the world. How did the lessons from that period help you, if at all, in the COVID crisis?
Well, thanks a lot. And I think the tragedy of Ebola did help us to prepare a bit better for this current pandemic, because when we experienced the Ebola epidemic in Liberia and in our neighboring countries, Guinea and Sierra Leone, we were shocked. You know, it was a strange disease. We reacted late as a government and as a people, and therefore Ebola caused a lot of harm to not just to the issue of deaths, but even those who recovered are still suffering from the disease as we speak today. One of the positives that we got out of that very tragic situation was that this time, even before we had our first case, the government developed a national COVID-19 response plan that was comprehensive. We engaged our partners, including the WHO and USAID, along with friendly governments, and then we set up an incident management system. So we have some of the infrastructure in place prior to us having our first case of COVID-19. And then some of the experiences we learned. And I want to link this to why it is very important for governments to ensure that there is access to information. Because without the involvement of the community, the government alone would not have defeated Ebola. So we replicated the Ebola scenario with COVID-19, and I can say very well that we are progressively containing COVID-19 in Liberia. We have had just over 1,000 cases. We have had over 800 recoveries and some deaths because people did not have access to health centers. But because we utilize the network of community stations, traditional leaders, to spread out the message, so it was a two-way street. As we're putting out messages about COVID-19, we're also getting feedback from the communities because they had access to information. They could demand of the government, say, look, what are you doing regarding contact tracing? We have sick people in the communities. Why are you not tracking them? And then we put into place a good surveillance mechanism along with our contact tracing mechanisms. All of these things that we learned from the Ebola crisis to help us make some progress with COVID-19. So working with partners like Carter Center in reaching out to traditional leaders was very helpful in where we are today with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have gone beyond the curve. We are flattening. There are many counties, many places in Liberia now that have gone green, but yet we still, because again of the lessons of Ebola and what our community people are telling us, based on the access to information that they have, that we still have to maintain vigilance and we have to maintain surveillance of the disease. So we've benefited a lot from the experience of Ebola as a country now in this COVID-19 pandemic.
It's very interesting. Although I think we all watch the Ebola situation with great interest and, as I said, concern, I doubt that many of us expected to face it ourselves or something similar to that a little bit later on. And I don't think we probably built on the lessons that you learned as effectively as we could have as a global community. So that I think is kind of interesting. Ms. Baron, the OGP has been quite active in working with parliaments on different issues, including openness issues. Tell us from the OGP perspective how you feel that parliaments can enhance both the legal and the implementation process for access to information.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you for that interesting question. In the parliament world, it's a community that I've been part of for more than 20 years. It was unthinkable a year ago to see this reality. We're seeing that more than 100 Congresses and parliaments have adapted their legislative work in record time. modernizing the regulations and incorporating technology to keep parliaments going. And this was really something that we didn't think was possible. But legislatures and parliaments, as you know, and we think, could be key and very, very instrumental in the recovery phase. And I would like to pinpoint 3 or 4 aspects that there is a lot of space for more work and for improvement regarding access to information of those bodies. I think the first one would be their role of creating new, of course, regulation and norms that guarantee access to information, but also looking within themselves as institutions within their own walls. And it has been in this aspect really a challenge during pandemic to work on, for example, the first publication within themselves. There has been a sort of backlash and not so much adaptation to public information regarding their legislative agenda, but also the necessary and basic data on publication of bills, voting information. There's been sort of an excuse that with the work of the pandemic, this has been halted a little bit. There's a lot of questions and efforts from organizations to keep this information proactively being published, and a lot of effort that hasn't been sort of responded yet. Then on the other side that I wanted to point out is on participation as well. On the one hand, people more than before, like I said, can access to the debates on Parliament because they're all streamed. But there's been a backlash in sort of meaningful and very active participation in the policy making. What we want is for the community and the civil society groups to participate in the policy making with their own data, with their evidence, and with their ideas. And this has been sort of a backlash, like I said, during pandemic. And then one last point that I want to point out is really, really relevant for these institutions is the oversight role, of course. It's and more even so in the pandemic, the oversight role, especially regarding relief packages from the executive. In this regard, there's many very bad examples, but I want to finish with an up environment. So there's, I think, good examples from countries that we haven't seen before do a good effort in transparency. One is Brazil and Paraguay, where they have created new committees to monitor public spending related to COVID very efficiently and very in a transparent way, where they host officials and activists and follow up on complaints and investigate what civil society brings to them, and they can even file criminal complaints if they see that fit. So 4 challenges for parliaments: adapt to tech work, publication, participation, and oversight. There's a lot of, like I said before, groups that have been advocating for more on these 4 aspects: Costa Rica, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Guatemala, you name them, and also at the subnational legislatures, where there's a whole new world with a lot of backlash there too. So again, together with the Open Parliament Network, which is the community that we are in, and the government of South Korea, we will work a lot within OGP to commit for more open parliaments. And so I ask again my fellow panelists to join me and the government of South Korea on our efforts to help parliaments adopt and sort of the key role they were meant for. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think for my work on access to information, I would see three areas for improvement, if you will, or for greater engagement from parliaments. One is on the adoption of laws, as you mentioned. Often we see laws being prepared within government and parliament just rubber stamping them. So more active engagement from parliament, I think, would often be good. Second, on the oversight role of implementation. So parliaments pass the laws, but then kind of, let them go out by themselves and don't do much after that, whereas ideally they should be reviewing them in a formal way at least annually, and then responding to requests and being open themselves, where some parliaments have done very well but others not so much. Xingqiu, last question in this round goes to you, and it's a double question. The first is, how can UNESCO support more dialogue and more discussions about this issue, about the importance of access to information, certainly in the face of COVID, but also for other crises? And the second question is a bit general, but how can UNESCO help to promote transparency and openness generally?
Thank you very much for providing me with this second opportunity to elaborate a little bit more on this very important issue in front of such a high-level panel. So, for UNESCO, information is a fundamental human right. We are therefore working to encourage public debate on these issues in a number of ways. One of the ways we are doing this is through the International Day for Universal Access to Information. This year, we are proud to be celebrating the first International Day since its proclamation at UN level by the 74th UN General Assembly. But let us not forget that UNESCO General Conference originally proclaimed this day in 2015, following requests from African civil society organizations. Another way we are doing this is by implementing capacity building projects across the world within the UN system and with member states and civil society. In Morocco and Cambodia, for example, UNESCO assisted in the adoption of access to information legislation. In Mongolia, we helped building capacities to monitor access to information. In South Africa, UNESCO trained information commissioners and their staff from different African countries. We conducted training on best practices for judges and lawyers in Latin America. For these efforts to bear fruit, we need to make openness and transparency structural elements in our societies. This is why UNESCO is proud of its contribution to the increasing number of access to information laws passed in the previous decade. Between 2001 and 2020, around 90 countries enacted access to information laws. This increase reflects the fact that information in the 21st century has become a critical area impacting human rights, development, democracy, and the daily lives of citizens around the world. By sharing good practices, we can support member states who are yet to join this movement, as well as member states working to implement these rules. In our efforts to strengthen the right to information globally, we can also count on the strong cooperation we have established with our partners, such as Open Government Partnership, Information and Human Rights Commissioners, FOIA-Net, the Global Forum for Media Development, Transparency International, the African Freedom of Information Center, and of course, UNESCO's member states. Given our role in this domain, UNESCO has been named the custodian agency for SDG indicator 16.10.2 on public access to information. The SDG framework has built momentum for promoting legal cultivation and improved implementation of access to information. In the framework of UN high-level political forum, Sustainable Development Goal 16, who covers access to information, is now scheduled to be reviewed every year. This is encouraging as it calls on us to show the significance of access to information in strengthening health, gender equality, building efficient and accountable institutions, and countering corruption. Access to information is emerging as a new norm in sustainable development, who can help countries defend the human rights of every person and contribute to the achievement of all SDGs, while ensuring that no one is left behind. By protecting the right to information and developing frameworks and capacities, UNESCO gives governments and societies the tools to build trust, provide direction, and help manage crises. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you for raising the SDGs, and particularly SDG 1610 and 1610-2. One of the questions was that we haven't had enough discussion about that. So, and although it was mentioned by a couple of the speakers, we're just on time, but and there's lots of questions, and we can't answer all of them, unfortunately, due to time. But there was one question that I pulled out, which I thought was very interesting. And if a couple of panelists want to say just a couple of words about this, somebody on the question board asked whether we are going to need to change our whole cultural relationship with information in this sort of, let's call it the new normal that we're seeing in the middle of the COVID crisis. And I think that's there's been a lot of discussion about the cultural impact, the longer term cultural impact that COVID itself will have, but to focus on the cultural relationship with information. I don't know if a couple of people have a few quick responses on that. That would be great. And just, go ahead and speak if you're ready.
Sure. I guess what's interesting, I have a saying sometimes, which is that there are no new problems, we just need more innovative solutions. So I think, I'm not sure that it's, I'm not sure that it is anything new. I think we've always had an issue with whether it's propaganda, now it's disinformation at different times over the generations. But I think the work that UNESCO is doing in the area of digital and media literacy is really, really important. It's like we tend to direct these things towards young people, but actually we all need it regardless of our age and impact, and just that sense of, that even changing the way we educate and learn, because, as I say, that idea of information being everywhere, but how we consume it, how we analyze it, being more important. So I think a more innovative solution rather than a new challenge is what we're looking at.
And Ms. Baron? You have to unmute.
Hi, sorry. I don't know what you mean by culture, new culture or old culture of access to information or of information, but I do know two things. One is, of course, definitely we will have a new sort of relationship with the methodology to access to that information that we needed from the civil society perspective. So we've seen at the beginning of the pandemic that, public officials weren't in the offices, so it's very difficult to access files, etc. And that was an excuse for the backlash in the right, in the access to the right. So we'll see more and more of something that we wished for before, which is the obvious technology related to the data that we want to access to. And with that problem that comes with half of the world not connected to Wi-Fi. And then a second thing, just to respond in a way with to the WHO sort of view of the infodemic. That's I think related to infectious information or information related to the pandemic itself, the disease itself, because in our world, from the civil society perspective too, I don't see a change in that we can't access to the same information that we didn't access before, regardless of the methodology. So there's a lot of, information that is not being proactively published related to funds now in pandemic, but before related to other funds, related to, you name it. I just don't want to name everything that we can't access now, but I don't see any difference in that from the pre-pandemic world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. These are issues, of course, that we could debate for the full amount of the time that we have and much longer than that. I do wonder whether things have not changed. One of the historic rationales for free speech was that in a fair and open competition without government restraints, truth would win. And I'm not sure that in our current environment, given the modes of communication, that that's the case anymore. In fact, we're seeing some evidence that false information is more successful in the open competition than truth. Anyway, we can't go too far down that rabbit hole. I will now call on the organizers to present a video.
Hi, I'm Karim El-Haj Issa, MENA Transparency Program Coordinator for Article 19. During the sanitary crisis in Tunisia, we have noticed that the citizens showed an increasing level of awareness toward the importance of information. Those citizens were looking for official proactive sources of information to contribute in stopping the fake news and stopping the virus at the same time. As an international NGO, we are also conscious that we have to take the advantage of the situation and contribute for the better implementation and effectiveness of the national law in Tunisia.
Aba hinyet Lucia kecher hinyet sukia anji kalis si kamhel COVID-19. Ven añe chikani bal chanye chilisubol chilak chan come mela kochaño lilak pilo mach buyu holo bikash lanchan yikot lak lumal yomush kotik chami mele nya chaño chami mele kan chaño bibo chatsa kochi chilak lumal chak pe chelel subol sakai ven kan chaño bibo sakai poko bik sakai kanyo pishli ye yikot manik micholo kelo chipashal alak pilo sabuen kahiyo chumbeño bisum Bacheli chichoño yo chokyako yulo buñi kancheo che tecnologías si kochayo chaklak pilo mar buyulo bikash lanchan ilak ño chelo si chayo chakirayo come ora miña chaño lo mar lahalik che tsibu bila chi come año mar buyuhu lo bik pehkanchel hun.
Hi, my name is Puputri Penny. I'm a reporter at cnnindonesia.com in Indonesia. I cover health-related issues to inform our community on how to keep safe during the pandemic of COVID-19. We inform citizens about how to prevent and mitigate the risk of infections, such as how to wear masks properly, keep social distancing, and washing hands. We tell personal stories from health workers and survivors of COVID-19 to build a better understanding and inspire people. We also provide an update from recent studies and interview with the experts to debunk the falsehood and report the facts. Now citizens can access all the information easily and apply it to their new normal life.
Great. Those were lovely messages and to hear from around the world. So I am going to say just a few words in closing the event, not too many because we're running out of time. I'd like to kind of organize comments a little bit along the three themes, saving lives, building trust, and bringing hope. And I think in terms of saving lives, we've heard some pretty powerful messages on both sides of the ledger, how wrong information can quite literally kill you or lead to your death, and also obviously about how correct information, accurate information will help protect you. And I suppose everyone listening to this has received some correct information and used it to protect themselves. And I hope that we have learned from this, that's true, and also, and especially with reference to the last video, how we need to get those messages to everyone in our society, regardless of language, gender, rural location, disability, ethnicity. We really, I think there's sort of the need for proactive information to reach every single member of society has never been greater than now, and that's hopefully we've learned how to do that better. In terms of trust, I think, and then we've had a lot of discussion about misinformation, disinformation, and trust eroders, I would say. I think it's been challenging during this period. Apart from anything else, the information that we knew about COVID was emerging at an incredibly rapid and changing at an incredibly rapid rate, so that the messages that we got at the beginning, weren't completely wrong, but we have gotten much more sophisticated and they've changed in those messages. But I do think that people, what we understand is that people do need to trust the messages they're hearing, or they will not use them to save their lives, and that's really important. And I hope that as the vaccine comes and gets rolled out, I see that as a particular opportunity for mis and disinformation to wreak a lot of harm, and hopefully the positive messages will prevail during that period. And then finally, when it comes to hope, and I thought it was rather bold of UNESCO to choose hope as a banner line for this message, because probably around the world a lot of people are feeling more of concern and anxiety than hope. But I thought we heard some very important messages from panelists about how hope can be built, and I would refer to some of the discussions about how it's helped build communities and bring people together and increase participation, and the role of access to information in serving all of those roles. And those are very much hope-based phenomena. We live in societies and we need to feel that we can participate in them and that we connect with others in our society. I think it's going to be an enormous challenge for almost every country in the world to rebuild, and we will need all of those three qualities. We need to be alive, we need to trust our government and trust each other, and we certainly need to have hope to rebuild well. So hopefully that will indeed happen through as we go forward. And we will bring this to a close with a final video streaming. Before we do that, I would like to thank again all of the panelists. I think you have given us great messages and very thoughtful and inspiring messages, and it's been a pleasure for me to chair this panel. And of course, to all of our participants who have stayed on with us, and we hope that you found it interesting and inspiring. Let's cue in the final video. Great. So with that, I will close the panel. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.